Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, ignosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudo-history, pseudo-morality, things that are found in religion. I support realism, axiology, of course, liberty, justice, ethics. I am also an anarchist socialist. I support Anarchism and socialism, progressivism, liberalism, philosophy, psychology, archaeology, and anthropology, advocating for sexual, gender, child, secular, LGBTQIA+, race, class rights, and equality. So if you can guess from all that, I support or challenge that I have an eclectic variety of videos on a variety of topics. Please take time to check them out, as well as if you enjoy them, please give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe, as new things are on their way all the time for my channel. Hi, this is Damien Marie AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. Or understood in other words, I am an axiologist, a value theorist, and I use that mindset of how I address atheism. And I'm here with a guest today who's wrote an interesting book. And then go ahead and tell us if you're an atheist, and if you are, what kind or in what way you see that. In other words, you know what I'm saying? And if you don't have any philosophical that you just are or aren't, you can say that too.
Okay.
The reason why, because I like everybody could just always like the word God. Everyone always assumes they know exactly what that means, and
Yeah.
people the same thing I feel with atheists. People will say atheist, but then you start talking a little bit, you're like, well, really. And go ahead and feel free to talk about sort of like the format. Basically, like I said, I don't, even people that are Christians, I don't try to like trap people or I hate all that stuff. I just try to be honest, open, and rational conversations. So just so you know, I'm a rationalist, not a skeptic. So I approach things differently. Probably get to almost the same conclusions, just in a different way of doing it.
Okay. So rather than my trying to remember all those questions and answer them in order, feel free to actually ask them to me, and then I'm more than happy to answer whatever I can.
No problem. Okay, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I know you wanted me to talk about first whether or not I'm an atheist and what kind of atheist, if so, I am. Kind of two answers to that question, Damien. Answer number one would be, I don't know that I am an atheist per se. However, if you were to line up a whole list of what religions or anti-religions are out there, I probably would identify closest with, of those things that currently exist, atheism. Okay. My problem with atheism is
classify what you mean by atheism, just so everyone understands.
Yes, I'm just about to get to that.
Yeah, okay.
Atheism to me means is against, and theism is God. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So you are trying to. I mean, as a really, really general topic here, you are someone who disavows a belief in God.
Yeah, I agree.
But my concern about maybe it's just semantics, Damien, but my concern about the concept of atheism is that it describes you as someone who is a reactionary to theism. Theism is in the word. I am no more an atheist as it were than I am an a-elfist or an a Santa Clausist, I don't know, or an a-unicornist, okay? What I am is just a logical thinking human being, logical, rational thinking human being. Right. And I don't like the idea that I get defined. It's like it says theism is the normal average. Everybody should be doing this. And you are an outcast group. You're trying to say I'm against that. I don't know that I would. I think I would just call myself simply a rational thinking human being, as opposed to trying to define myself according to others. I would think that the idea of God, as is understood generally today in the and certainly in Western culture and in much of Eastern culture, is so weird. I don't know if that's the right word.
Irrational.
Yeah, right. It's like, why am I the one who has to define myself as the weirdo? You know what I'm saying? It's more like, okay, I'm a rational thinking human being, and you are a pro-theist or something like that. Yeah. I don't like it.
I'm not against what you're saying. I mean, I'm a very strong anti-religionist, atheist, anti-theist. But I agree with you. I would just say I agree with, because I say I'm a rationalist. I'm a rationalist, not a skeptic. My thinking is, it is not rational to believe in things that have no evidence and defy logic and reason. It's not rational.
Well, in reply to that,
what you're saying, and I shouldn't have to have a word for I'm not irrational. In that sense.
Hang on. The reply to that from a theist might well be, well, of course, if you're just talking about the rational, Mr. AtHope, you'll never understand God. His mind.
Oh, they told me that. Yeah, they said that.
But this is what I have heard. I was in seminary many years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I left quite disillusioned, and this book, there it is, ladies and gentlemen, The Man Who Figured Out God, is a result of at least 20 years of work and thinking and researching it, what have you.
Yeah, definitely. From what I've read, it was interesting. I liked it. It's definitely thoughtful. It's definitely closer to my kind of thinking, because I like thoughtful stuff. I'm not as like some atheists are like into one-liners or getting people. I'm not really into getting people. I'm into finding out what's true.
Exactly. So, what they would say is, of course, you can't understand God any more than a worm can understand the Socratic dialogues. His brain is too big, yours is too small. You operate on rationality. He's much bigger than you. So coming at them and saying to them what you just said to me,
right,
which is, God is not rational. How can you believe in God if it's not rational? Here's my answer to that. And this is what really got me thrown off of the theology I had been into since I was a kid and through high school and into college, okay? My answer to that is, well, wait a minute. Who, Damien, answer this quick question. Who runs this planet?
Mm-hmm. There isn't a person. It's a faulty assumption, because it starts with that there's a something running anything.
Okay. human beings basically are in charge of this planet, much like dinosaurs were millions of years ago.
Right, not in charge at all.
I mean,
waiting for a meteor.
yeah, exactly. You know, we are at the top of the food chain, et cetera, et cetera. We are the most adaptable. And the reason is not because we're the fastest or the strongest or the most prolific or whatever you want to put down there. It's because we are the smartest.
Yeah.
Now, the Bible says, and I'm talking now to the religionist here, the Bible says that man was made in God's image and likeness. Well, I say, you know, if that's the case, surely man's mind would have to be that which is then most like God. Because if man was made in God's image and likeness, as opposed to the other animals and what have you out there, right, creatures, well then, what is specifically different about us? I mean, chimpanzees are 99% have all of our DNA. I mean, they're you know, bonobos and what have you. So my point is, if God has made us in his image and likeness, then our mind has to be that which is most like him. Secondly, well, according to the legends and the stories and the myths, God has indeed spoken to man many, many times. He chooses this, I'll admit, the people he chooses to talk to, Joseph Smith, you know, we can make a list here, Sun Myung Moon, you know, why not then? Why doesn't he just talk to me? Why doesn't he just talk to you? He could easily do this, you know. How tough would it be for God, who has already demonstrated that he can talk to human beings, you know, allegedly. Yeah, allegedly. If he can do that to Joseph Smith or Abraham, you know, or the ancient prophets, or, you know, the list goes on, then why couldn't he simply come down one day, take over the, you know, just you know, I'm sure he'd be forgiven for just taking over the signal of the three major broadcast networks. Oh, yeah, exactly. And simply say, hi there, you know, hate to interrupt what you're doing, but I'm God, just had a couple of things I wanted to get clear here, and clear up this mess that God has become and the mess it's made of the world he created. It would be just so simple to do it that way. But that would be a more ethical thing to do, and God doesn't. If the Bible was or some of the other holy books were any kind of thing to figure out what a God would hold as ethical, God would do that. I mean, a hidden God is absurd, and a more absurd thing is a God that punishes with hell, especially if the only crime is non-belief. That's unethical. I mean, the God of the Old Testament did all kinds of punishing. I mean, that story about Abraham and his sons is just appalling. Yes, you know, just to remind anybody who may watch this in the future what that is. I mean, there was the trying to remember what it was, the Hall of the Sacred or something like that. But anyway, Abraham and his sons were part of that. And that's where they made these big sacrifices to God all the time, you know, the animal sacrifices that are so popular in the Old Testament. I think it's back in Leviticus, maybe, Deuteronomy. So the two sons, whose name escapes me, it's Abu and something or other, but they decide to sacrifice an animal to God, you know, which is, you know, if you read this, I think it's Leviticus. I could look it up in my book, but I think it's in Leviticus, where there are these incredibly detailed descriptions of how animals are to be prepared and what parts and what part goes here and then what part gets burned. And I mean, this is how you're supposed to, you know, honor God. So the two sons of Abraham, they decide, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to find an animal, an oxen or something, we're going to bring it into the altar, and we're going to sacrifice it for God. So they do this. So God, his reaction to this is, instead of saying, well, thanks so much, I really appreciate this, you guys going out of your way, you know, I mean, you could have eaten that oxen, I know you guys are hungry sometimes, I really appreciate this. What's God's reaction? God's reaction is, I didn't ask you to do that. And then he strikes them dead right there at the altar. Bang, they're dead. And he will not let Abraham even mourn for them. You know, Abraham, those are my sons. Don't you worry about it. You know, they're dead now. What is that? You know,
well, there's a verse too in about how when Moses supposedly and the people that were at the Mount Sinai supposedly, and they were talking to God and they were trying to bring God incense, and then God killed a whole bunch of them, like 100 and something.
Yeah.
And then the people in the town complained, and then God killed them too. I mean, you're like, wow, that sounds like Kim Jong-un level of
exactly.
Like, you will not even mourn people. You know, it's unethical.
This is mass murder. You know, and Noah's Ark. I mean, you're talking about mass murder.
Noah's Ark.
Holy mackerel! You know, it's the biggest murder ever.
Genocide of the whole planet. But it's a good God. And then they go, oh, God's perfect, except when he killed the whole planet and then gave us the rainbow as I'm sorry, I won't do it again because it was wrong. Because then if it's wrong, it's obviously an error. And if it's an error, then God's not perfect. But God admits to being evil. He says, I will to do evil against my people or something like that. I mean, he flat out says it. Yeah.
Well, to finish the answer to your question, so what started me on this was not necessarily the evil things God did. They seem to always have answers for that, you know. But the whole idea, Damien, that God would not, I mean, you look around at the world today and you see, well, my God's better than your God. You have the wrong God. I have the right God. Why don't I kill you? You know, let's fight over this. I mean, I know you have made a great study of the history of religions going back, you know, whatever you do, 10 or 15,000 years, whatever. Starting.
No, actually, I start at 3 million, and then I go all the way until 5,000. I explain pretty much. I mean, not super deep on all of them, but the whole planet, all religion, how it all is moved with people and transferred, and why it did and where it changed, all until we get to what I consider is since the organized religion after 5,000. After 5,000, something different happened to religion. It got a military for the first time. It got state. It became Egypt. It became a whole region. In a sense, it became an empire with a religion, where the religion was part of the whole empire, because a pharaoh, in a sense, is the king priest of the whole religion and the whole society. So you have, but so my point is, so that I do everything. I want to know what happened. How did we get to that? And so that's what I research. Yes.
So I mean, and I know you've studied that deeply, and you have books and what have you regarding your conclusions and your avid interest and all that stuff, and that's great. But my point that I was going to make is, I'm sure you're the last person on the planet I would have to tell that there are a lot of different religions out there.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. You don't need to tell me that.
Okay. So I know you know that.
Oh, yes.
So my point is, what we get here is not people disagreeing slightly, like you might say, well, I like wearing black shirts.
Right.
And I might say, well, I'm kind of fond of purple.
Like
so you go, well, wear purple, you wear black, blah, blah, blah. Does this look black to you? I'm sorry, it's kind of purple.
It looks kind of black, actually. I like it. It looks good. I'd wear it.
Well, you can't have it, Damien. I'm sorry. But my point is, this is not what happens. People fight and die, and they kill each other because they don't have the right religion. I mean, you take a look today at ISIS. That's not a new phenomenon. You know, what they're doing, take a look at history. You know, ask Damien. He'll give you plenty of examples about how this has happened throughout the history of religion. Why would God sit up there allegedly in his alleged heaven, look down on this and not say, wait a minute, you know, I talked to Joe Smith, I talked to Abraham, I talked to St. Paul in the bush on the way to Damascus. Okay, these people can understand me. You know, I can do a Tower of Babel thing here real quick. Let's face it, I'm God. You know, I'll talk on all the networks, the satellite thing around the world. and everybody will understand. This will only take a few minutes because I really got to run. I got another something I'm doing in that next galaxy over there. So, and anybody, you know, as I pointed out in my book, anybody who couldn't spare the time on that particular day to listen to what God had to say, well, then you could Google it, you know, afterwards and listen. And he would make it clear. That is where it began for me, you know, being told that God acts in mysterious ways. Of course you can't understand him, John. You only have a rational brain,
Yeah.
You know, can worms understand the dialogues of Socrates? Can birds understand physics? No. And you only have
but I would say too that let's just take that position, because I like doing dialectic. So let's take that position. Let's assume I am a caterpillar or a worm or whatever you want to say, and I can understand and communicate, because that's what they're saying right there in a sense. I can communicate with other worms, right? So we have language, because right now real worms do not. But let's assume real worms can communicate, right, in some way, and that they can understand, because you have to have that level of understanding too to grasp God or whatever. So we have this understanding, and they tell me, like a theist tells me, that I'm supposed to believe in something I do not see. I have no more reason to consider that rational as the worm, that there's a Socrates, until it's been presented to me. So it is completely rational to not believe irrational things that you have no way of, in a sense, supporting. The theism to me is an odd thing. It's the confirmation through faith that something not in reality is actually part of reality.
Well, now you're skipping to the end of my book here.
Well, wasn't trying to, just was making a point.
You know, but you know, the whole idea there about what people might look at you, other people might look at people like you and me, okay, and they might say, well, listen, Damien, come on, buddy. If you want to be an atheist, that's your business. You know, I want to be a Presbyterian. I want to be an Orthodox Jew. I want to be a Sunni Muslim, blah, 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 blah. You know, isn't it? I mean, you like black shirts. I like purple shirts. Bada boom, bada bing. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Okay. First of all, atheism, again, a word I'm not particularly fond of, but atheism is not an alternate belief system.
Oh, I agree.
Atheism isn't kind of a system that says belief itself has a problem. It's like saying, we're not talking about colors of shirts here. I'm talking about walking around with no shirt on.
Right. But saying you have a shirt.
Yeah. You know, I don't have a shirt. Exactly. You know, it's a whole different thing. And a couple of problems I see with that are one of the ones I brought up already, which is, you know, once you declare religion, you know, you buy into the belief system and the theism and the whole irrational, for whatever reason, which I think I explained in my book what that reason is, but you buy into my God's better than your God every day, millions and millions of times around this planet. My God's better than your God. You know, the missionaries who go around converting you from, you know, your belief to their belief because they understand that their belief is the right one. That's the first problem. But the bigger problem is the one you just brought up. The bigger problem is, Damien, the idea that that those who are theists, those who are believers, begin to confuse reality with imagination.
Yes.
What they think of as, you know, what you and I might see as pretend, all of a sudden to them is real. And I think that way of thinking, which doesn't just happen. I mean, we're taught this when we're little kids.
Mm-hmm.
We're taught that make-believe angels and make-believe cherubim and seraphim and heaven and hell and theism and all the rest of it, you know, is just as real as this pencil is. Okay, here's a pencil. I see it, I feel it, I touch it, I smell it. That's a real thing to me. is anything that's associated with most religions real? This is the thing that gets me. And when you start adopting that way of thinking, I think that's dangerous. When you can simply say, okay, here to me is an extreme example. I'll never forget this. This is back when George W. Bush, as president, was explaining why he invaded Iraq. And here's what he said, among other things. He prayed about it.
Yeah, scary.
And he listened to God. I sat there looking at the TV and said, what? Well, Dumbo told me not to invade Iraq. What's the difference? You know? I mean, what? And that's where I think things get really, really crazy. And it's not just in thinking about religion. That way of thinking, okay, that you can substitute what you want to believe, what makes you feel good, what gives you comfort, is in fact real. Where does it end? You know? I mean,
well, the same thing. They have a problem with real. They have a problem with truth. They have a problem with evidence. They have the problem with reason. When you say the word reason and they say stuff, you're like, I kept telling this guy, I said, that is a logical fallacy. And he goes, well, what are you, some logician? And I'm like,
yeah.
What it means, a logical fallacy, is that you've said something that doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow a rational progression of things. So when it's like if I said, I have milk because I'm a cat. That is a logical fallacy because you're saying something that is incoherent. It doesn't follow. What I mean is like jumps in logic. Yeah. People don't get this, especially religious people, because they aren't taught to follow logic. They're taught to follow fantasy. Well, they do leaps of faith, which is basically, I close my eyes and I can't see anymore and I'm good now. I mean, it's like sticking your head in the sand.
Picking up on exactly what you're talking about here, okay? And I've said this to people, okay? I expect you to get this right, Damien. Don't disappoint me, all right? Here is a little logic problem.
Right?
And it's very little. Trust me, I'm not going to embarrass you. Okay. All boys are tall. I am a boy. Therefore,
I am tall.
Correct.
What's I saying? I'm trying to say they don't understand how to.
No, let me finish. Number two. Okay. All boys are tall.
Mm-hmm.
I am tall.
Yeah.
Therefore.
Well, the thought would be that you must be a boy, but you only know the status of boys. You don't know the status of anything else. Because women can also be tall.
Exactly.
Or a transgender person or whatever. I mean.
Right. Exactly. See, now to you and me, when we live our lives based on logic, the very brain that was made in the image and likeness of God, okay, that kind of thing, it's unbelievable how many people won't get that wrong. I'll say, I am tall, therefore, and they'll go, you are a boy. No, your logic is backwards there, and it takes a while to explain it. I'm glad you got it, Damien, okay? Didn't let me down.
Well, I don't claim to be a logician. I'm a rationalist, and I try to use reason as a method. But in general, a lot of people, because I'm kind of good at doing the logic stuff. I actually have not really read books of logic because I would think I have. I haven't read every logical fallacy. I just understand how general good thinking. It reminds me when people go, well, what's one good way of finding counterfeit money? Well, you feel a lot of real bills. Man, you'll pick up on a counterfeit, like, whoa, this doesn't even feel right. You can already tell by the texture of the thing. Then you can tell by the looking at it. What I'm saying is, when you're used to what's correct, when you focus on making sure that everything, and like I try to do in my life, is as accurate as possible. What I try to do is what I call belief etiquette. That means that I have a standard of how I try to process things. That I try to have reason belief acquisitions. Whatever comes in, try to make it reason. But guess what? We're not reasonable thinkers all the time. And you're a reasonable thinker when you realize that you're not reasonable all the time. That's reasonable. When you think you're always reasonable, you're not reasonable. You've just proved it. But so I realize that things will come in, so we need to have good belief maintenance. That we update are we still good with what we had accepted? Is it still at the accuracy it should be? Because sometimes it sounds really accurate, and then the more information you get, it gets less and less and less accurate. Sometimes, though, it's the opposite. You at first have this kind of doubt, but then the more you hear, oh, no, man, it's got support. Well, okay. So I've had it, but that happened both ways to me, so it's understanding that just because I accept something as true, even the status of its value can shift or move by new evidence or new understanding.
And that's what I call truth.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you get the truth.
Truth grows. You know, truth is not, as Aristotle tried to point out, and Stanley Kubrick in his movie 2001 tried to make a point about. It is not an undeniable, indissoluble, always forever monolith that never changes. Truth grows like everything else does. I make a big issue about something I call the growth force in my book. The point being that you have to have, your mind has to be adjusted. It's kind of like what you were just saying, to apply just simple rules of logic to things that you approach every day. Right. You can't just, are you familiar with a guy named Erasmus?
Yeah, that name sounds familiar, but off the top of my head, no.
Erasmus lived about the 1500s, and he was in the Renaissance time. And I don't know if you remember a guy named William F. Buckley Jr. No. He was a conservative thinker who founded, I believe the magazine was called The New Republic. And back in the 60s, I'm giving my age away here, but back in the 60s and 70s, he was a leading conservative thinker, okay. William F. Buckley Jr. He wrote a book, the name of which escapes me, but in it, he makes the following statement, which is probably true. Erasmus, he says, was the last man who knew everything. Now, what that means is, back in those days, there was only like 5 things to know about medicine. Okay, there was a half a dozen things to know about farming, to know about mathematics. Okay,
right.
He was conversant in just about everything that was going on. Back in those philosophy, there were like 6 philosophers. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Weren't many new ones at that point coming out of the Dark Ages, and he was the last man who knew everything. Today, you and I, individuals, can't possibly know everything. No. Something goes wrong with my car, I got to take it to the mechanic. He takes care of me. Something goes wrong with this computer. Well, I'm over at Best Buy with the Geek Squad. I don't know how to fix this computer. There's so much stuff going on today. And what happens is, because it has to, you have no choice. Damien, you might be the smartest man on the planet. In the year 2020, you couldn't possibly know everything. No. So what happens is you outsource your thinking to others. Okay. And when you get used to doing that, and the religionists sneak in the back door, and you go, well, I guess they're right, and you just accept it. You're born with it. You're indoctrinated with it. You learn not to, and this is what I was back in seminary. You learn not to question what God has to say because you couldn't possibly understand it. And so I know we're a half hour into your first question. How did this happen? But that is how it happened to me, Damien. I thought about this and I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Even if you think God has a mind of 7,000 times the size of mine, well then, just like you and I can probably understand most of what's going on with worms, he could understand what's going on. And he demonstrates in the Bible and other holy book, quote unquote, writings that he knows exactly how to talk to you and me. And when I discovered that, and I said, why doesn't he do that? Why does he watch all this fighting? Why does he encourage people to believe things that aren't real? What is this blind faith, leap of faith thing that we have to do to accept God? His mind is his image and likeness. Why won't he just use that? Look at people like you and me. How easy would it be for him to convince you and me he's real? How tough would that be? Why wouldn't he do that? You know, I don't understand this faith thing, this blind faith. What's going on here? So that's how it started for me. And then the other question that came from the other direction is, once I figured out that this God indirect messenger thing, how come he talks to me through ancient holy books and prophets and mysteries and talks to half a dozen people here and there, but doesn't talk to me? Once I figured out this didn't make any sense. Once I figured out that sense is, if anything, is what it should make, I was hit with kind of a conundrum. Well, I'm only one guy. You know, as Regis Philbin used to say, I'm only one man. Mm-hmm. Why does so many people over so much time and in so many different places and in so many different cultures believe in a God? What is it about this belief? You know, I mean, man, over the course, and you would certainly know this from your studies and your writings. Along the way, they have accepted, there's no more God of lightning. There's no more God of the wind. You know, the gods drop, there's something, have you ever heard of what's called the God of the gaps?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Okay. That's a logical fallacy that people do, basically, in a sense, that wherever they feel there's a gap in science or gap in understanding or gap in logic, reason, whatever, that must be where God is. Like they say with the Big Bang. Well, how do you prove what started everything, Damien? And I go, well, we have no proof that anything was but natural. And we do see that stars and dust turn into planets and turn into people. So to think that maybe the universe could get that somehow cosmic dust did it itself or what, I don't see where the problem is. Well, and God of the gaps would be to add something extra to the equation.
Right. Whenever you don't understand something, it must be God.
Yeah.
And my point there is, over the course of history and time and culture and different kinds of people, they all come up with their own gods, you know, just like they come up with their own music and their own art and their own sports and their own foods that they eat. And thinking about this over and over and more, I said, if we can abandon so much of the stuff as a creature, as a human being, over the course of so many, I mean, you and I probably believe or think incredibly differently than people did 50,000 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
First off, to me, 50,000 years ago when we became, in a sense, what they considered modern humans, but the brain stopped, in a sense, devolving somewhere about 12 or 10,000 years ago, or maybe 15, or became what we could consider really modern humans. Like today, the ones that what I'm saying is a better way to say it, that 15,000 years ago or 10,000, somewhere on there, to now, we're no different. We're exactly the same. So
I think most scientists agree that that's about 300,000 years ago. When
we were talking about where humans branch from the thing. That's 300,000 to
Homo sapiens, what they call Homo sapiens.
But that's not what I was referring to, though.
Okay, but my point still is over the even if you only go back 15,000 years.
I was talking about how we're the same. That's all I was saying.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, because the ones at 350 to 300 over there in Morocco are actually kind of like proto-human, sort of. And then it's about 200,000 in East Africa that what we consider really kind of like the beginning. That's why scientists like to say, well, the DNA goes 200,000. Well, 200,000 and maybe a little more. But that one was kind of like an outside offshoot more than like the main hub of us.
Yeah, well, and you know, we're probably, you and I, as we sit here, are probably evolving right now. You know, it's a very slow process. You don't feel it, but my point is, go across all those years. You and I today don't think the way they did back then.
No.
my point is, thinking has grown and come along as we have evolved, as new stuff has been thought of, imagined, discovered, et cetera, et
I totally agree with
cetera.
that. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So my point is, why didn't the concept of God somewhere die along the way? Why is it just as strong in the world today in 2020 as it was in 10,000 BC? You know, and that conundrum, that God was illogical, talking to me through these ancient prophets and sitting up there at his alleged heaven and watching all this fighting and this confusion go on when he could straighten it out. One wonders why he didn't do that allegedly with Noah. Why didn't he just come down and say, no, I'll talk to you in a second. Everybody else gather around here. No, he drowns them all and says Noah, is the best human being, et cetera, et cetera. So I then began what eventually resulted in this book is a very long process of reading and reasoning and thinking. And I have tons of books with book ears and underlines and notes in the column. And I think my epiphany about this all came maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I was thinking about this, and what occurred to me is the reason I call it the God concept.
It is a God concept. There is no God, so yeah.
Right, and you have to.
I agree with that.
And you have to be careful when you use the word. Einstein, for example, he said God to him was the sum total of all of the natural laws of the universe. And how this whole thing hung together in such an interesting, complex way. He wanted to understand that, and he said those laws and rules, and he regretted later referring to it as God. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Because the word God is so weighted. Everybody. But my point is the God concept never died, and it occurred to me, maybe the God concept is something similar to art, music, language. They never died out. Maybe the concept of God is a function of the human brain, like all the other things that never leave the human being, Other things that are just seem natural enough to everybody. We all have these kinds of things. And we all seem, wherever man is, you find God. Columbus goes across the ocean, figures he finds what he calls savages, comes back with a whole bunch of missionaries who are going to fix these people. And what do the missionaries find? They have religion and God already. How could that be? The missionaries hadn't been there yet. And that happened all over the world. The Incas, the Aztecs, the Eskimos, all over the world. You find all the way back in time, which is your specialty,
which my book is going to explain, and I actually have all kinds of. I'm gonna have almost 200 or so, or 150 or something pieces of art that I've made that explains it, because it's just I'm covering too much ground. So to me, just real quick about gods. To me, low gods are probably first. Low gods, and probably, in a sense, animal deities that used to be totemistic animals, spirits, that for the clan, that then became morphed into like this larger being as a protector of areas and things like that, or even your guardian spirit kind of thing. Those are low gods. They're always for a very limited people or a limited place. It's not that's a hard God to spread around, because it's always limited to the volcano or something.
Right.
So if you go later, there's no volcanoes. Well, there's no God there. I mean, so they're not very good. So those, I agree, those don't really last very much, or they change because they're not very worthwhile for the people. So I think that's one thing. Then 12,000 years ago, it's like they had started animals. By 11,000, they had female goddesses and animal gods. And then by 7,000 to something, you have the first male god. So now they didn't throw away the other stuff. Like I've heard someone say, like all of a sudden all goddess religion was gone. You don't know history. No, it didn't. It blended together, and that's where you get paganism in a big sense, that they start having multiple gods. And I do agree, they start kind of in spirits, like spirit of the animal spirit of thunder, which is a bull, later becomes like, say, Thor or Zeus.
Yeah.
But originally it's an animal. It's just like in the Egyptians too. They have the females are connected to the bull, and the bull also is connected to the moon, and that has to do anyways. But my point is, so this stuff starts, and as people traveled, especially Indo-European, which is like a large portion, like German, French, Italian, Greek, people from Turkey is where it all sort of, Ireland, I mean, all that is all the same language source. And so they all seem to have a similar, in a sense, or kind of religion, is because it filtered down. But I do agree with you. The reason what stays is the one that, like I said, low gods aren't good. See, Jesus is kind of like a low god. He's a human. So he's this like almost, because hero figures can sometimes be like, they call them, I can't remember the name now, but it's like a low deity in a sense, or it's like a half a deity, almost like Hercules, right? Half a deity or whatever, or they say that the pharaoh is half a deity.
Pharaohs, yeah. I was just
right, and the Japanese, emperor is married to the moon, the sun, who's actually a goddess, and anyways, but so yeah, so those aren't considered high deities. High deities are more the controlling, they have more power, and they're generally about the sky. The moon, the sun, the stars, whatever. So when they say heaven and they say sky, they really mean heaven in the sky. So they thought ancestors were the stars and all that. But I do agree with you. The reason why, if Jesus would have stayed a low deity, no one would know about him. But it's the fact that he was melted into the Father God.
Yes.
And then another low deity, I believe, like the Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit is another low deity, because it's not the same as. So it's like you have two low deities and a high deity, and that's what makes the Christian, in a sense, triune gods. To me, I would say is like it's like these two different things. They're added, into this other thing.
What I filter out of what you're saying, okay, is that in some form or another, when, to use your words, back in the very, very beginning, when gods were like volcanoes and stuff, and then they grew out of that, and volcanoes weren't, as you said, worthwhile anymore. They're
limited, yeah.
What didn't happen is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
When they decided that volcanoes weren't really in charge of the planet or whatever, they threw out volcanoes, but they held on to the fact, the God concept. Yes, that's the thing that I find fascinating. However it's expressed over time, everybody, all these cultures seem to grab onto it. They all seem to say, God seems to be, someone once said to me, and I think it was back in seminary, someone said, in everybody's quote unquote soul, there is a God-shaped hole. Okay.
I heard that before.
Okay. And everybody's soul is a God-shaped hole, which means we all have this thing in us that seems to demand and is only filled comfortably by something we call God. Okay. So that's what I was after. After my epiphany, where I said, wait a minute, I think there's more going on here. I think there's something to do with the essence of man than something out there inspiring me. I think there's something, and I'm not Erasmus. I don't know everything, but I thought.
I agree with you too. I'm not saying I know everything either. As anything below 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, I started. I don't really know as much.
Yeah. But my point is, there's something about the human being. There's something about you and me that seems to demand some kind of something to fill that spot, you know. But it's not what, this is another issue I have with calling myself a pure atheist, because I think, and you know, if the conclusion of my book talks a lot about what it is that we confuse with an external supreme being, and why we have thought for so long and in so many places that it in fact must be an external supreme being of some kind. Yeah. It's all going on in here. The example I use, it's kind of like Copernicus, who's one of my heroes. I admit Copernicus is one of my heroes, you know?
Yeah.
You know, Copernicus said, you know, look, I got this telescope thing going here, and I looked out, and I've been looking, and I've been writing stuff down, and I'm going to tell you something. The Earth goes around the sun, boys and girls. It's not the other way around. Right. You know? Now, you know, I read kind of a cynical review of that once, where it was said Copernicus held that information until just before he died, because he knew that he would be persecuted. So filling in for Copernicus is Galileo, who read Copernicus's stuff and said, you know, I think this guy's got something going here. You know, I took his writings, I looked up with my telescope, and I said, holy cow, I didn't realize, oh yeah, you know, Copernicus turned the world around. Nothing changed, as I say in my book, but everything changed. Because things changed so dramatically in the mind of man that the church had to try and squash it. You know, Galileo, who was one of the best-known scientists of his time, was walking around with this heresy thing saying man and the earth were not the center of God's creation. What the hell were they talking about? You know? And the wacky thing here is just a little footnote. Do you know when the church finally forgave Galileo?
No, I don't.
In the 20th century. It took them that long. They wouldn't give in. They wouldn't. You know, it's like Trump saying he's has not gone. I'm still elected. You know.
Yeah, he's crazy.
The 20th century is like 1950s or 60s, something like that. One of the popes said, you know, we ought to clean this up. The poor guy, you know, I mean, we put him up in this, we told him he'd have to go live in this tower. And, you know, to Galileo, I don't know, he recanted. He had a family he was raising, and he said, fine, I don't believe that. But he would walk around telling people, you know, yeah, the earth is the one that moves. You know, don't. I still believe that the earth is the one that moves around and not the sun, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the deal with Copernicus. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Ludwig Wittgenstein. He's kind of the father of epistemology, which is a study of how we know what we know. You know. Yeah,
I have a thing called the Hammer of Truth, where I teach people how to use basically ontology, epistemology, and then axiology in progression. Ontology, always clarify what something is. Epistemology, how did they know that? And axiology, why is what is being offered valuable?
Valuable, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I get all that. That's fine. But the point I'm making about Copernicus was he turned things around. And he said, it's not this way, it's that way. Okay. So the first question was, well, why did it take Copernicus? I mean, that was thousands and thousands and thousands of years, you know, from Aristotle and Socrates back, thinking that the sun went around the earth. And the answer to that question always was, well, that's because what it looks like. Stand out in your backyard and it seems like the earth is still and the sun is going around you. The sun comes up in the east, it goes down in the west, and I'm standing still here. Well, Wittgenstein, after Copernicus, said, well, how would it look differently? You know, what is the difference between the sun going around the earth and the earth going around the sun to all those people, all those millions of years back? And the answer is, there is no difference. You know, it looks like the sun comes up and the sun goes down, but now that we know it's the other way around, the earth spinning on its axis looks exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Why were people so Wittgenstein was so why didn't half the people think one and half the people the other? Copernicus had to explain because it just looks so obvious. Way number one just looks so damn obvious, you know?
Yeah.
Why would you think the Earth is spinning and that the sun is still? It just doesn't make any sense until he came along and showed that. And all of a sudden you looked up and you say, oh, I'm spinning. How many people walk around going, whoa, oh, I'm spinning at 25,000 miles an hour. I got to hold on. Nobody knows that, you know? It just doesn't seem like that's really what's happening, you know? So my way of looking at this God concept is that it's not something that's out there. It's in here.
Oh, it definitely is.
And what is it in there? It's not like the people who existed before Copernicus, Damien, the people who existed before Copernicus were fine people. They were not nuts. They were not stupid. Their brains were as big and as developed as ours is.
Yeah.
Okay? They weren't conspiracy people. They didn't meet and say, why don't we spread this stupid rumor that the sun goes around the earth? What a great joke. Right. They just didn't know. And my point is, the Pope, let's take the Pope. He's not a bad man. He honestly, in his heart, believes what he's talking about, you know?
Or we assume that. I mean, I don't want to know that I know other people's mind. We assume that from what it appears to be. But
I never met the Pope. I'll be honest with you. Never met the Pope, but I met a whole hell of a lot of priests. Okay. And these people were sincere. Okay. They were just as sincere as the pre-Copernican people, you know, try to tell them that, you know, 100 years before Copernicus, try to tell them that it's no, it's the earth revolving. It's not the sun coming. And they would pat you on the head and they wouldn't be mean. And they'd go, well, okay, then listen, I got to run, you know? They weren't bad people. They weren't conspiracy. They honestly believed that's what it was. It looked so obvious to them. I think, Damien, I understand what it is about the function of the human mind that creates this hole, this godlike hole in everybody. Okay.
You mean that what they're talking about, the emotional realm that they're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying is,
trying to understand.
What I'm saying is, the idea of God has always been, whether it's a volcano or a thunderstorm or a disease or whatever, or the moon and the stars, whatever, has always been a relationship to something that is bigger and greater and more powerful than us. And
that's why I was agreeing with you that I think that maybe one of the things is that because the lower ones don't seem to do as well. It's the great. So I think another thing is, like, when people like famous people, they don't like the average, you know, B list or even C list or D list. You want the A list. So I think it's kind of
get me Brad Pitt. You know?
So I'm just saying. So I could totally see how that God could do everything. Why would I care about this one who only does nothing? Like just a grain. This one does a whole world. Yeah, exactly. I can totally see how.
And every time, Damien, that one of these, what you refer to as lesser gods, fell to the wayside, they didn't say, "Oh, there's no such thing as God." They said,
"No, they didn't.
Well, this greater thing must be God." And when that fell by, this greater thing, until now we've wound up with this incredible supreme being who is in charge of every damn thing you can possibly think of, everything you can possibly see or feel or touch. He's in charge. He's all loving. He's all good. He's all knowing, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So now you can't get beyond it anymore. You know,
I can see. Then there can't be another God,
right?
Because they've made, in a sense, the God of God. And they always say the King of the Kings and the Lord of Lords. Yeah, you've made the philosophical top of everything.
Hey, see, they just now they got the monotheistic one guy who's in charge of all the other gods that ever existed and everything that ever existed. You know, and what strikes me is that's the way it was before Copernicus. But someone came along and said, you might want to look at it this way.
Right.
Okay. There's a song from, I don't know if you're familiar with the Broadway musical from many, many years, a long time ago, called Oklahoma.
I've never seen it, but I've heard of it. I've seen Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay, well, okay. I have seen that several times. But there's a song from Oklahoma where it goes, everything's up to date in Kansas City. They're going about as far as they can go. Everybody thinks, there's, today, you look around, you might make a few tweaks to a couple things here and there, but man, we've gone about as far as we can go. Every generation thinks the same thing. And, you get to be a certain age, you look back and you go, boy, I thought, everything was, and here I am. And my grandkids will look back at me quaintly. Grandpa used to have one of them phones that was attached to the wall. I mean, what is that? And by the time the grandkids are grown and they're our age, cell phones, they'll laugh at those, much less people who had to talk to a wire coming out of a wall, So what I offer, and I think the reason possibly you're interested in even talking to me, what I offer is the next phase. And it says, look it. It doesn't just say what Richard Dawkins does. He stops when he's asked the question, well, where does God come from? He goes, well, it's a meme. Well, it kind of is a meme, but that's not where it came from. You ask Christopher Hitchens, and he says he's more constant. Religion ruins everything. He wants to show, that point. You ask Sam Harris, okay, and he's, well, faith is killing us. We got to somehow.
Okay.
We're back. All right. So where I was talking about was Dawkins stops at meme. Hitchens stops at, religion ruins everything. Harris kind of stops at saying we got to get past faith because it's killing us. I want to go one step further. My question is, well, what exactly is it that creates that alleged hole that everybody seems to want to fill with a power that's greater than yourself all the time? Yeah. Why don't they stop like you and I have and said, we're logical thinking human beings? This whole God thing is an invention. It's a fantasy. We got to stop with this stuff. It really, in real life, is killing us. So I think, and I am offering my answer, and it has to do with how the brain itself actually functions. Okay, I don't want to get too deeply involved in this. My book explains it a whole lot better, but the idea is that the idea of a power that is greater than the self, that we can't necessarily really, we don't understand it, and we don't, it operates in our best interests and wants us to do what's best for our lives. There is in the brain, the way it's physically constructed, that creates this, I'll call it not a delusion because that suggests some kind of disease, but an illusion. Put together with another concept I call externalization. And externalization is kind of an easy concept. I mean, the whole world, Damien, exists within your skull, your whole world, okay? You have 5 senses that send information there, but it gives it, and the brain figures it all out. But you need to determine what is a dream and what is reality. And the brain has a way of externalizing, figuring out what it is that's the real world out there and what it is that's not. That's what I just call that externalization. It's like, if your eyeball, when light strikes your eyeball, I'm using this now analogously, right? When light strikes your eyeball, it paints a picture of what you're looking at on your retina in the back of your eye. That picture is upside down. Okay? The brain turns it around. Okay? Here, let me just do this little experiment, okay? I want you to stare straight at me. Okay? Stare straight at me. Yeah. All right? And what you're looking at is my face. What you may not be aware you're also looking at right now is the end of your nose. Okay? Right. See it there? Yeah. Now that I brought it to your attention, you can see it. All right? The brain works in funny ways. It literally blocks that out because it would be a distraction for what you want to really look at. You know? Okay? So in a similar way, it's an automatic reaction, just like it takes what's upside down and turns it over so that you can really see the things right side up in your world out there, so you don't fall over all the time. You know, it's an automatic function. This externalization function has to function, has to be there. There may be a scientific name for it. I call it externalization because I didn't know if there was a name for it, but it's an automatic, it's so automatic you don't even realize it. It's something that goes on that you don't think about, you know? I mean, you just blinked your eyes at me. I saw you. Were you even aware of that? You didn't think about it. No. You know, your heart is beating. You know, how many baseball players do you know, Damien, when they hit a home run, go out of their way to thank their nerve synapses? You know? I mean, it's just silly. But that's what's doing it all. Okay? Okay? That's, you know, and this externalization is the brain's natural, necessary way of telling you what you're putting together on the what you're painting on the canvas of your brain with these senses coming in is in fact the real world out there. It has to happen, and you don't even need to know it. It's like you don't need to understand the digestive.
Well, it's not even limited to us. Have you ever seen if you take like a monkey or a chimpanzee or even like some sort of a and you show them a magic trick, they freak out.
Yeah.
They know, they're looking for it. It has to be, because like you were saying, they know reality has to follow if there's no magic.
See?
They know there's no magic. So if you show them magic, they freak out because they go, that can't happen.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that at all. You know, that makes tremendous sense to me based on externalization. It's automatic. The brain just does that. If the brain didn't do that, we would have no way to get around in the world we live in. And there's no need for you to understand it any more than there's any need for you to understand how the digestive system works so you know enough to eat when you're hungry. You know, automatic. Anybody got a hamburger? You know, I mean, I'm hungry, you know?
Well, that's what I would say is one of the problems with axiology is that we are valuizing our mind does that. There's already been scientific proof in neuroscience that we think in axiology, we think in value structures. Yeah. And even animals do that. That's how you would choose this thing over that thing, or this people over that people, or that. The way that we're able to do that is valuizing. The problem is, as what you said, is it's haphazard. We don't like reason or valueize. We just go motions. So sometimes we're ethical because if we're on that system I'm talking about haphazard. If we don't have no standard of reasoned axiology, then haphazardly we'll have an axiology. It just won't be reasoned.
Exactly. You know, so that's what I eventually arrived at. And the conclusion is an external supreme being is it's like still looking at the world upside down because that's the way it came in. You know, it's like still looking at the world as if the sun rises and the sun sets and the earth is still. We need to turn this around. God is not a supreme being out there. He is nothing more than a simple illusion created by the combination of how the forebrain communicates with the hindbrain and the process of externalization. You know, I have a much better explanation of it in my book, which I hope you promote. You know,
I will. I'm going to probably put, since I can't be in the picture, I'm probably going to put your book along the side of you the whole time. Because
Oh,
why
great.
not? Why not?
Also, if you would put underneath, it's available at Amazon.com/books. That's where you can find it. You know.
Well, and you can give me a link. I have a blog anyways. I want to have all your Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you want. I mean, if you don't have
I
any,
am
that's
not
fine.
on Facebook. I'm not on
Okay,
Facebook.
well, I'm just saying, if you have a website, anything else you want to give me, I'm saying, or the link to Amazon, any of your info that you want, I'm just saying, or a bio on you, all that stuff is fine. I'll put that all on the blog.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
not.
Yeah. Okay. But I spent 20 years writing this book, and sitting here talking to you, I don't recall every word, but my point is, the God that we think needs to be is not out there; it's in here.
Yeah.
He, she, it, whatever,
Right.
does not need to exist. I know you think it does, boys and girls, but it doesn't. Okay. And if you think it does because without a God out there, there's no morality, okay? I cover that. If you think, well, if there's no God, then I won't go to heaven. I cover that, and we've been talking here for going on an hour and a half, so I think that's probably enough. But that's the whole thing with me. I don't know that I'm an atheist and that I walk around trying to denigrate religions and say, I don't believe people who are religionists are stupid. I think they are, as Copernicus did, simply confused. And I was confused. And I
would just say that, like you said at the beginning, I also don't call people stupid. I feel like it's unproductive. They're irrational. See, I like to show it to something that can change. Stupid generally means that you've made an error, or that you think generally an error. But irrational is something, to me, saying that it's an error in the way that you can make it better. Where someone is just generally doing something and they're not a stupid person. Like I didn't become an atheist until I was 35 years old, and I also started with the opinion sort of you did, because for 2 years I didn't talk to or meet anyone that's an atheist. I didn't even know there was other people that were atheists. I thought it was just me. I mean, it's stupid, but I mean, you don't know. I didn't know other people. I thought everyone seems like they all believe. Well, just let them do their thing, man. And I was going in school for psychology, but then the more I had to study psychology, the more they kept cramming this God stuff down my throat. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this now. So for me, the position of atheist is anyone who does not hold an active, positive belief in the position of God is an atheist. And that's so atheist isn't some. I do agree with you. So in a sense, it's a philosophical explanation of not having fantasy beliefs about gods. But so it doesn't, like, I just wanted to address your thing. So do people become anti-religionists? I'm an anti-religionist, but even that is different depending on who it is. To me, I'm also a humanist. So my anti-religionism is the fact that I see religion as toxic, and I understand it's myths. If people allowed it to be myths or would keep it to themselves, I would, like you said at the beginning, I would have less problem. If every believer did not indoctrinate their kids, let them believe as they wish, but they can even still push their beliefs, but didn't force it, and didn't force it on society, weren't trying to make laws in America or anywhere else that can somehow fit to their sick psychology of what a God is, if they just they did their own thing, I wouldn't have as much problem. I would still try to help people, but I wouldn't have as much problem. But the fact they usually don't do that they actively try to invade government and take over things and make laws and remove rights from children. There's actually rights in the United States to abuse your children because you have a religious exemption. Horrible.
Damien, don't get me started, okay? Don't get me started, buddy. I'm telling you, I read the paper and I just seethe. I mean, it's like, this can't be true. This is 2020. This can't be true. And
Well, all I'm trying to say is go back to the atheist. So an atheist doesn't mean that you're an anti-religionist. Atheist just means you don't have the active belief in theist of God. In fact, someone could be an atheist and still be religious. I don't see how, because it doesn't
Yeah,
make sense.
I don't see that either.
But it's not impossible. In fact, one of the first atheists was a Hindu before the Greeks. In 2600, there's an atheist philosopher who's in a sense a Hindu, but he says all the gods really shouldn't. It's the behavior that matters. Which, but my point is, I think that if you can reason that magic, super magic isn't here, and there isn't any evidence of any magic, I don't know why any magic would be reasonable. But I do think that definitely super magic, when there's no magic, is a stretch.
Well, dogma and rites flow from religion. Religion flows from the alleged existence of a God. And God is a concept that there's something greater, more powerful than you are. Like you say, we have come to this point where it's one guy in charge of every damn thing you can possibly think of.
And you know what's really funny about that? All monotheism is male. There is no female monotheism. And also I think it's about 4,000 years ago with the god Tan, and then it also goes to, in a sense, Iran, because the people travel, and then Egypt, and they have all these similar ideas of a single thing, but it's always male. And even like with the pharaohs, he tries to make his wife more, but it's still in the religion of the sun god.
Well, see, now you start talking about the admixture of religion and politics. Let me ask you this question.
Politics, really.
Who is the most important person in Christianity? I'll give you a hint. Jesus is number 3.
Supposedly the most important person would be, in a sense, the Father God, I would say, in the Bible. But as far as how people live their, I would say probably Paul was probably one of the most impactful.
Paul is number 2. You're close. St. Paul is number 2. My opinion is the following. The most important man in Christianity is Emperor Constantine.
Well, yeah, it started the whole bullshit.
Right.
Yeah.
In the 4th century, he said, you people will now, he wanted to go to war. He saw a cross in the sky. He won the battle, which won the war. He said, Christianity must be the right religion, and from now on, everybody will be a Christian or I'll kill them. And he was in charge of the entire Western world at the time, the Roman Empire, which became the Holy Roman Empire. And so without that, prior to that, Christianity was nothing more than a side cult. Back in the early days, they would capture these Christians and feed them to the lions for entertainment, Christ, I think, was just the front man. St. Paul was the guy who turned the entire Christian concept into dogma.
Oh, okay? I agree.
He was the one who was he did all. Christ left no writings whatsoever. Here's the Son of God, can't write. Paul, who lived at the same time, he was the guy who could read and write, and he took all of this concept and turned it into a religion which lasted as a cult for 300 years until Constantine got a hold of it, and he said, I'm going to give you this whole little spot right in the middle of Rome, and it can be yours, and you can rule the world from here, blah, blah, blah. So when you talk about, people evolving gods, from throughout the centuries and across time, to me, that's just a new incarnation, if you will, of the same God, the God concept, and what they become has a lot to do with, the politicians who are in charge at the time.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically An axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, ignosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheist can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist, with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudo-history, pseudo-morality, things that are found in religion. I support realism, axiology, of course, liberty, justice, ethics. I am also an anarchist socialist. I support anarchism and socialism, progressivism, liberalism, philosophy, psychology, archaeology, and anthropology, advocating for sexual, gender, child, secular, LGBTQIA+, race, class rights, and equality. So if you can guess from all that, I support or challenge that I have an eclectic variety of videos on a variety of topics. Please take time to check them out. As well as if you enjoy them, please give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe, as new things are on their way all the time for my channel.